Hi, guys. This is Mrs. Albee. Excited to share with you some things that I've learned about standards based grading and specifically improving student achievement. I have been practicing standards based grading for about 3 years now in the classroom in high school. And the way that this came about was a colleague of mine and myself. We noticed that many of our graduating class had a discrepancy between their skills and their GPAs. They weren't admitted to the local university because they didn't score high enough on their standardized tests, yet they had very high GPAs, about 4.5s. So we noticed this discrepancy between their grades and their skill level, and we wondered, okay, what is the problem? Is this grade inflation? Are these kids really not learning anything? Or is it just, are they poor test takers? So we did some digging and some research and found that standards-based grading is a great way to, to solve that issue. So to begin, I want you to think about this question. What did your credential program teach you about grading? If you're like me, my credential program taught me nothing about grading. The only thing I learned about grading was from how I was graded when I was in high school, when I was in college. And so we tend to go into that default mechanism and do what we've always done and do what was taught to us. And so we just repeat the same thing. So today I want you to consider a couple things. Sometimes standards based grading gets a bad name, and people think that it's a negative thing. So I want to share with you some topics that we're going to be covering. Number one, we're going to talk about what it is and demystify some of those myths and clear things up. And then hopefully I can explain to you why standards based grading is a good option and maybe some of the problems with a 100-point scale. Additionally, I hope to give you some quick guides on practical implementation, including establishing learning targets, rubrics, grading scales, feedback, and anecdotal learning logs. Now, implementation, as I said at the beginning, I've been doing this for a couple years only, and each year I'm finding new ways to improve and to modify, and changes that I've had to experience because of um, grade software that the district uses, and changes that we've had to adapt to. So don't think that you're going to get it right away. I mean, you might, but it does take time and patience to be able to implement it the best way. And I'm still finding ways that I can improve. So let's talk about what it is and what it's not. It is fair, and it does reward students for what they know. A lot of times people think that standards-based grading is grade inflation, and it's actually the opposite. It's not grade inflation at all. It's truly a reflection of what students know. And it's not easier, um, and it's based on feedback and giving students what they can work on, as opposed to an inappropriate use of averages. Standards-based grading fosters a growth mindset and helping students to realize that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to not know something, that the purpose of education and learning is to actually learn. So thus it does encourage real learning, and it doesn't allow students to mask their level of understanding with their attendance or their good behavior. Um, so this is a great visual to show you, and all resources and references are at the end of this slide, so you can find them as well to learn more about it. But standards-based grading is a shift in practice, and I'd encourage you to take a look at what regular grading has been on the left, and how it can shift towards the right. And one of my favorites is down at the bottom, where our current typical way of a point system is more teacher involved, and teachers are the ones directing. And a standards-based grading system encourages student involvement, and it encourages student ownership of learning goals and targets. And so I also like how it really does encourage learning versus just behavior and good behavior. And especially the last one, authentic experiences. So research shows that grades are most effective when they reflect achievement, and that points-based grading is actually having an adverse effect on students' motivation to improve their understanding of subject matter. They're more concerned about getting those points, and instead of actually learning something and showing learning for something. And that message that we're sending, that oh, all you have to do is earn those points so you can pass this class, it's sending the message that they can be successful without actually improving the quality of their work. This is a great video by Rick Wormelli. I'm not going to go through it right now, but I would encourage you to watch this. He talks about the problem with the 100-point scale and how you have 60%, and this is his word, 60% of aptitude, and that 0 to 59 is an F. And how is it that that's such a big scale? And standards-based grading, it's really only 10%. 0 to 1 is an F, and 1 to 2 is a D, and 2 to 3 is a C, and so on. And so he gives you a different mindset on how to think about points versus standards. So I'd encourage you, and the link is at the end of the slide presentation. So here's an adaptation. A lot of times kids have a hard time understanding, okay, so yeah, I got a 4 on this. So what does that mean? I like to communicate their scores via words like advanced, competent, developing, or does not meet the standard, so that to change the shift from a point system to a competency system. And so this I adapted from Robert Marzano's formative assessment and standards-based grading. Um, Also, the College Board AP English rubric, I referred to the 9-point scale because many of the classes that we teach in high school are AP classes and they have a different scale. So if you need to communicate to your students, okay, what does this grade mean? Eventually, then, and this is a way to communicate that. I have used a 5-point scale in my honors class because in my school students get 5 points for an A in an honors class, and I've used a 4-point scale in my regular ed classes. So you can adapt these different scales for the different needs that you have. This year I actually had to adapt a 10-point scale because of the grading software that our district changed to. Prior to this, I had developed my own scale within the grade book, but I couldn't do that. And so I had to change things a little bit. But as you can see, there's different ways. And I would encourage you to also look at Marzano's book, Formative Assessment, because he really goes into the details of what the scores mean and how you can scale them to the best way for student achievement and student learning. So if this is something that you feel like, you know, I want to do this, a couple steps. First step would be to establish well-articulated learning targets, because those are the things that you're going to be assessing. Those are the things that you're going to be teaching, and align those targets with a standards-based grading scale. In English, the best thing is a rubric, and I give those scales to my students so that they have access to them. And then, of course, designing assessments to measure those learning targets and how they've been taught, and whether or not the students have learned them and to what degree. And when you give those assessments, one of the most important steps is designing deliberate feedback opportunities. How am I going to let my students know what they need to work on? How am I going to let them know which areas to focus on for the next task or for a revision, if that's what's going to be happening. So, and also to establish a feasible way to track student progress. We do live in a world where we have to report grades, and those grades are online. And so sometimes they need to be done quickly, or, you know, we have deadlines. And so there's different gradebook options that you can create. So I think this is an interesting little fact. There's only 9,000 hours available for instruction, and to cover all the Common Core standards, you have to have 15,000 hours. So obviously, we can't do it all. So we have to establish and pare down to the essentials.